like you, I watched the tender tribute on Saturday to honor the victims of 9/11. Heartfelt, searing, an open wound still. When the Twin Towers fell 20 years ago, who could have imagined that this chapter of history would culminate in the airlift of refugees from Afghanistan? And is there anyone who was not moved by that sight? Truly huddled masses. Due to the short time frame and the sheer number of people seeking to be evacuated, multiple domestic American airlines were engaged to aid the effort alongside the military. Of the many notable stories that emerged, one stood out to me. Delta Airlines pilot Alexander Khan freely shared the reason why he wanted to participate in the airlift. He said that he felt like he could put himself in the shoes of those who were fleeing. And he explained, "I'm the son of an immigrant to the United States. My father was a Holocaust survivor who was liberated from Buchenwald. He came to the United States not much differently than the people who are coming to the States now. My father was coming with the clothes on his back, no family, no English skills, and had to start life all over again. Luckily, he was starting in a land of opportunity." He continued, "This is going to be a frightening experience for them, but it has the potential to be excellent. My father put himself through school, became a doctor, and years later actually went back to Germany as a physician for the US Army." What optimism he shared, born out of his family's own experiences. Like Alexander Khan, for most Americans by and large, our ancestors were refugees too. In my own family's important papers are letters from European relatives who reached out to be sponsored as the Holocaust encroached, who needed a lifeline to be released from the anti-Semitism that was crushing Europe, as well as any future for those who were Jewish. Perhaps your own family has experienced something similar. Today on Yom Kippur, as we examine our souls, our deeds, and our obligations, there's no question that as individuals and as Jews, what we must do, we must respond, because our Jewish story resonates with the imperative to move from oppression to freedom. As Jews blessed with privilege and good fortune, sometimes we need reminders of our obligations, which is why Yom Kippur can help us sort through our responsibilities and see them anew. Sometimes we need a reminder about what a second chance can mean. Remember when Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments, and God said to him, "Hurry down, Moses. Your people have been quick to turn aside from the way that I have enjoined upon them." And then as Moses came down, he could see the Israelites singing and dancing around the golden calf. And so in anger and disappointment, he hurled the tablets he had been carrying and shattered them. It was God who said to Moses, "Let's do this over. Go ahead, carve another set of tablets, and I, God, will inscribe the words that were on the first set." That second chance made a difference for the Israelites, who had not yet mastered the basics of covenantal responsibility. They needed to work at getting it right. Having a second chance is something we seek for ourselves today through repentance and the desire to turn the page and start over. And isn't that sentiment a new start at the heart of our obligation to those who are arriving on our shores. More than anyone else, refugees need another chance when they can no longer safely remain in their home and often in their country. Reluctantly, they leave their country of origin to seek safety, security, shelter, peace, and opportunity. Just imagine if you had to leave your home and your whole world with only the clothes on your back, and then fit the rest of what your life could accommodate into a small backpack or carry-on bag. Well, we are watching this in real time. Through no fault of their own, circumstances often force a departure. And beyond the particular circumstances of Afghanistan, the push to leave home could be a civil war or an oppressive government, climate change, discrimination, intolerance, or genocide. And for some, it is simply a desire to better their lives. Not so long ago, we were once where they stand now. As little as they had as they fled, they were the lucky ones. And yet it's hard to imagine their plight as ours. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks taught, "I used to think that the most important line in the Bible was love your neighbor as yourself," which we'll read later today. And then I realized that it's easy to love your neighbor because she or he is usually quite like yourself. But what is hard is to love the stranger, one whose color, culture, or creed is different from yours. And that is why the command, "Love the stranger because you were once strangers," resonates so often throughout the Bible, and it is summoning us now. As we've come to learn with the pandemic, numbers can be overwhelming, really too great to comprehend. What do 4.5 million COVID-related deaths mean worldwide? But if you yourself have been touched by COVID or lost just one dear one to this disease, then the numbers are no longer meaningless. You may extrapolate the pain of your own loss, and that may create a path of understanding, allowing for connection with the incomprehensible statistics in our global crisis. And so it is with refugees. That personal connection is immortalized in our texts, taught from parent to child, from generation to generation. Remember that our ancient ancestors were refugees too, fleeing slavery and oppression on their way to a promised land. The Haggadah explains the ancestral story of every Jewish family with these words, "Arami Oved Avi." My ancestors were wandering Arameans who went down to Egypt when their resources were depleted. We put down roots and raised our families, and when circumstances changed around us, we were enslaved for generations until we were freed with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Now note the use of the first person in that narrative. It's still read by us in just that way, as if in our own voice. In countless ways, we have internalized this message from the phrasing of the Shabbat Kiddush, Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, a reminder of the Exodus from Egypt, to the yearly reenactment of Passover itself, complete with bread of affliction and bitter herbs. And when we deplete the cup at the suffering of the Egyptians, that is not just symbolic, but rather a call to action. HIAS, formerly known as the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, has helped to welcome generations of Jewish immigrants to this nation and others, likely many of our own parents and grandparents. It used to carry this explanation on their website. Once we helped refugees because they were Jewish. Now we help refugees because we are Jewish. And let me say that again, because we are Jewish. In HIAS's August report, it noted, "We are witnessing a humanitarian crisis unfold in real time. Before the evacuation of Afghanistan, worldwide, there were more than 80 million displaced people, and 31 million of them refugees. Of those 31 million, 40% are under the age of 18. Minors, children. And what are they to do? Where are they to go? Who will take those little hands and help them to safety?" We can ask those questions from the perspective of an outsider, from our comfortable armchairs. But if we were to identify with their terrible circumstances, as Alexander Kahn saw his father's experience reflected in the passengers he flew to freedom, well, then we would be more interested in providing answers. HIAS notes that our own country has been a welcoming haven for refugees for decades. After World War II, more than 650 displaced Europeans came to America. Again, it's of note that many of them were our immediate relatives or ancestors. That resettlement program was later formalized through the Refugee Act in 1980. And some additional 3 million refugees have found their home here since then. Those new Americans have become our neighbors, homeowners, tax-paying citizens, devoted to the education of their children, just like us. Every one of us has an arrival story. It may have taken place a generation ago or multiple generations before that. All that we are today, all that we have achieved, is only possible because of the courage of our ancestors to start a new chapter in a land which afforded them the most basic human right, safety. Before the pandemic, Emanu-El partnered with Congregation Rodef Sholem to work with HIAS to resettle a family group in New York. Through the unflagging efforts of some 20 dedicated volunteers who were available 24/7, who then relied on the support of some additional 200 committee members, we saw firsthand what it means to have a second chance, to live in safety and peace. As any newcomer can tell you when it comes to learning a language, finding one's place in a new culture, finding work that matches one's skill set and provides sufficient income, figuring out how society works isn't a straightforward path. Something as simple as finding a doctor or registering for school can be a challenge even for those of us who have lived here our entire lives. But the opportunity to live in a country that is more secure than their country of origin makes the difficulty worthwhile. Is there a value that can be put on safety and peace of mind? It's too soon to know how we will be called on to help and how to meet this moment. There are no perfect answers, and in this case, there are no easy answers. though we are considering every avenue to offer support as a congregation. Whether we can support a full-fledged resettlement effort depends on you. Will we have enough volunteers to meet the year-long sacred demands of welcoming the stranger? But I also want to say that if you can't commit to something so encompassing, that day-to-day volunteering, even small projects which you can do on your own, can add immeasurably to someone's quality of life. And first, you have to consider your own skills and resources. Can you act as a partner to practice English? Would you be able to hire someone at an entry-level job which has the opportunity for growth? Can you volunteer your legal skills to assist asylum seekers? COVID has made all this a bit more complicated, but the needs remain. The Highest website has links to individual volunteer efforts. I want to conclude with a personal reflection. When I think of refugees, I remember one dear congregant, Warren Zorek, of blessed memory, with great affection. His life of service to others was shaped by his childhood. Winnie was among the few who were placed on a train called the Kindertransport, which brought children out of Nazi Germany to safety in England. According to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, this effort was spurred by British public opinion and the persistent efforts of refugee aid committees. These children, who arrived alone without any family, were able to begin a new chapter because the public recognized their responsibility to others. In doing so, the citizens themselves helped create a bridge to the future for these often orphaned children while saving them from certain death. Warren had lost everything except for his own life and his gratitude. He was ever grateful to those who took him in, gave him a home, soothed his sorrow, and gave him hope. And for the rest of his life, Warren paid it back. He was the consummate volunteer. Among his many efforts was his work with the fire department and his devotion to the work of the Red Cross as a volunteer allowed him to rise through the ranks. When people needed help, Warren was there. In every interaction, he was centered on how he could make life better for others. And knowing him made you want to do the same. He was the definition of a mensch. As a public acknowledgement of his ceaseless efforts to aid others, when the Olympic torch passed through New York on its way to Lake Placid, Warren was given the honor of being one of the torchbearers. Congregants from every corner of the temple accompanied Warren to celebrate and affirm his unending mission to bring light and hope to those who have suffered at the hands of tyrants. And now the torch is being passed to us. As we hold it high, may we see our ancestors' experiences in those who seek only the simplest things, safety and security, and may we light their way to a better future. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you and yours be sealed for blessing in the book of life.